I think in some organizations, HR and people leaders are ahead of the game, are seeing this shift, are seeing their business stakeholders asking for something different, and are proactively trying to build those solutions. Yeah, it's the boring stuff that usually goes wrong.
Welcome to Outsized Advantage, a podcast about agile talent and flexible workforce strategies. Today we're going to talk about how the discussion has moved on from whether or not to implement agile strategies to how to actually implement them. I'm Niklas Tillander, founder of Outsized, and I've got with me today Anurag Bala,
Hello.
my co-founder, in a very nice sweater today.
Yes, nice and new.
Yeah, and a fluffer. What's the fluffer?
It's a professional bit of
great
podcasting equipment.
Okay, good. So Anurag is, as I said, my co-founder and also heading up our Asia Pacific operations. So maybe to kick things off, why is it that it's kind of a no-brainer today in terms of executing agile workforce models? Why is it more important today than ever before?
Yeah, so I think if you take any large organization, and then specifically, as you know, we focus on our markets, Asia, Africa, Middle East. But if you take, any large enterprise operating in the market today, and if you look at the landscape they're trying to operate in, it's a highly uncertain environment in all aspects, actually. So if you look at market uncertainty, political, social, environmental, economic, leaders within those organizations today are facing a very unpredictable, volatile market environment. And in an environment like that, where you're not able to project and forecast, you don't have certainty on what the world's going to look like, when you're going to get disrupted by a new competitor, when the economy is going to shift, when your supply chains could get disrupted. To succeed in that environment and to win, a critical component of building resilience is agility. So if you think about, if you take your personal lives, take an organization, when things are uncertain around you, when things are unpredictable, you need to be resilient. You need to be able to bounce back. You need to be able to adapt and flex. And so agility becomes critical to having that resilience. So I think for organizations to win today, most of them will point to resilience and agility being central to their ability to win and succeed. And if we take that concept of agility down into capability building, that's when you've seen a lot of rigidity in a lot of organizations. So if your environment around you is unpredictable and you have very fixed capabilities, hence fixed cost, it's very difficult to pivot, shift, adapt, be fleet of foot, because you have fixed capabilities. What your organization can do is determined with who is in your organization today and what capabilities you have. And hence why you actually see a lot of these mass redundancies in the market, because organizations build themselves in a certain way, they build certain fixed capabilities, markets suddenly change and they have to quickly, reduce that cost base very, in quite a harsh way. So I think what organizations are seeing today is, okay, for me to succeed and win, I'm going to now look to build in more flexibility in my capability base. So we're seeing this shift from fixed cost, fixed capabilities to variable cost, flexible capabilities. And organizations putting a lot of priority on that. And if we take capabilities, why? So, when we first came to market, organizations, when they thought about delivery, would think in 3-5 year time horizons. I think, again, because of the unpredictability in the market, organizations are thinking in smaller pockets of work, smaller packages of work. So they're breaking down their strategies into more project-based work. And that brings, again, an ability to be agile, right? To break your work down into more project-based work, smaller bite-sized components that allow you to deliver quickly and execute while the market is what you think it is, rather than building things over a long 3-year period. So you're seeing this shift in terms of project-based work, building flexible capabilities. But also, when you take the actual capability building, previously an organization, let's say they were building a data team, they would say, okay, in a year, maybe we need a 30-person team to be able to deliver what we want to deliver over a year period. But are they utilizing that team every day, 365 days a year? No. So actually their capability demand is ramping up and down over that period. So if you have a fixed number of 30 in that data team and you only need at any given time, that's only at peak, and at different times you need 10 people or 15 people or 5 people, it doesn't make sense to hire 30 people, whereas previously they would do. So I think what we're now seeing is even the use of independent talent, both for project-based work, but also for building capabilities in different ways. Having a small group of permanent individuals that understand your IP, understand your culture, understand your business, the knowledge of the organization sits with those individuals, and then a proportion of that capability being flexible, where you can ramp up and ramp down.
So this is not just for project-based work, but also traditional kind of roles that where companies are.
That's where we see the evolution. So previously organizations were very bought into, well, for project-based work, an independent talent ecosystem makes complete sense. It has a defined start, a defined finish, a scope of work. I don't know if I'm going to need these capabilities at the end. I don't want to hire permanently because the project needs to happen now. So an independent talent solution makes complete sense for project delivery, right? To fill capability gaps, fill capacity gaps, execute projects. But the big evolution and where you're seeing organizations shifting talent models, and what's driving the talent model shift is actually a different way to create capabilities in the organizations. So actually moving away from, say, 100% of my professional workforce is going to be independent, 100% of my marketing team, my tech team, my digital team, my data team are going to be, perm employees. Start to actually get hybrid teams where you have percentages of your core roles being independent and a percentage of those being perm.
Okay. So how do companies then, how do they start this journey? What are the different kind of aspects of agile talent when they start kind of to execute those strategies? How do they typically kind of move from A to B?
Yeah, so a lot of that is driven by who in the organization is leading the initiative, and the different approach an organization may take. So some organizations are highly business led, and what I mean by that is you have individuals within the organizations that have a need, that have a demand for independent talent, for building capabilities in this way, or for high volumes of project delivery. And those individuals are just out there saying, what's the best way for me to get my scope of work delivered? I'm responsible for this part of the business. I'm responsible for these outcomes. Bringing in independent talent will help me deliver those outcomes. So I'm going to drive this agenda. So the business leading it, and therefore people leaders and HR leaders sort of facilitating that as a solution. So the business are leading it from I need this to deliver what I have to deliver, and therefore go to HR and people leaders to try and solve it and put the challenge to them, or go and solve it themselves and saying, hey, we're not set up for accessing this type of talent economy, so we'll go and find it ourselves, or we go and find partners to solve this for us. So that's very much focused on solution. What you then have is people leader driven. So you have some initiatives where increasingly the HR leaders within organizations have got a seat at the table. Some of them are already ready for that. Some of them maybe weren't expecting it. But previously, I would say there was a view that the HR leaders within the organization were seen as more transactional. Right? They didn't have a seat in terms of driving strategy. And I think what's happening now is that a lot of focus is on the people leaders saying, how are you going to solve for this? How are you going to help us shift our capability model into this new approach? How are we going to do it? And HR leaders are now grappling with, well, how do I do that at scale? The way I think and the way we've built teams and my scope on today has been completely different. So they're sort of grappling with this, and they're trying to find partners. They're trying to think through strategies on how they do it. What is the impact to culture, to organization, to processes? So some of it is where business are just placing it on the lap of HR leaders to solve. Some of it is just business led, just based on need, and they're trying to solve it in the background. And it really differs organisation to organisation.
And is there a kind of a best practice in how, if you kind of could start from scratch, how would you recommend doing it? Let's say it's an organisation that hasn't really I mean, they know they want to implement this, but they want to do it, but they haven't really started yet. What would be the best kind of setup to do that in terms of how would you organize that as an internal team or otherwise?
Yeah. So what I've found so far is when it is purely business led, what you do get is speed of decision making, and you get movement quickly. So because it's very solution orientated, right? However, what gets lost a little bit is the long-term thinking of what does this mean to an organization. So some of the things we've talked about in previous conversations around what about the infrastructure, what about the process, what about the value proposition, what about making sure they're paid on time, what about the risk it brings into the organization. So some of those infrastructure conversations don't get held. So the business leader is just thinking solution. How do I fill this hole in my project, or how do I build this capability quickly? So they're just looking for the solution. And then the problem gets put into the lap of HR leaders to solve for the other things. If it goes the other way, the upside is that you get the infrastructure, you get the controls, you get the focus, it's centrally managed, but you lose some of that speed of delivery that sometimes the business want. They want the answer, they want the solution. So what we found so far is that HR and people-led controls, so centrally designed in terms of putting down standard operating procedures, value propositions, processes, infrastructure, systems, making sure that is there and in place. And that really needs to be led by your people leaders. But then allowing your business leaders and the people that need the solution to drive in terms of what do I need and how do I get it quickly. So those systems you put in place needs to balance both risk in terms of, hey, we're bringing these people into organization, we need to go through the right processes, what does that mean for us, but as well as getting the business the outcome quickly. Because what we have seen is that in the independent market that, as we say, is very dynamic, if you take too long and you're too slow and your controls are too bureaucratic, you can't actually access the talent you need. So I'd say essentially defined operating model and defining how things should work done up front, and then in terms of business have the ability to go and then drive to get their solution they want very quickly.
In terms of kind of overall organizational buy-in for shifting to a more agile talent model, are there differences there in terms of whether or not it's being kind of a centrally led HR kind of type activity versus a business area that's kind of just going for it, right? Have you seen differences there?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the business areas that I think are the fastest adopters to this is you'll see business areas that are highly project based. If you take digital and strategy teams or technology teams or marketing teams, there is high propensity for project-based work within those types of divisions. Product, innovation, R&D. These sorts of teams are high adopters of independent talent and are out there constantly looking for solutions. And if they can't find it internally, they're just going to go and find it from somewhere and then ask for forgiveness later. Yeah, exactly. They'll just go and find the solution and they'll sort of say sorry for doing it the wrong way later. There are functions within businesses that are traditionally seen as being functions that, hey, this is business as usual where we hire. So finance, risk, compliance, operations, are not traditionally business areas that you would associate with, I guess, either project-based work or these are roles. Therefore, hey, independence don't make sense. But we're again seeing that. We're seeing that change because of this shift in how to build capabilities. But usually the demand side of the business is led by those other functions in the main. And so far, I'd probably say that the business is driving this faster than HR and people leaders. I think in some organizations, HR and people leaders are ahead of the game, are seeing this shift, are seeing their business stakeholders asking for something different, and are proactively trying to build those solutions. But I would say in the main, it's reactive. So the business start doing something, they start to bring in these types of individuals into the organization. Things don't work very well or work properly, and then it brings the attention of your HR and people, your procurement, your risk, and they come in and say, well, what's happening here? And then they try and bring in controls and governance and value proposition around it. So I'd say right now it's sort of a do it to solve the problem, create the problem, people leaders then come and try and bring some governance and controls around it to then build something that's more sustainable.
Okay. And in terms of executing these strategies, are there areas where you see companies getting kind of tripped up more frequently than otherwise in terms of a specific aspect of executing these strategies? Whether you mentioned stuff around bringing in those kind of operating models and value propositions for independent talent, but are there other areas that are kind of important to try to get right, and where companies sometimes struggle?
I think it's actually we find the biggest issues come at onboarding. So of the independent.
Okay.
So that's where everything can start to fall over a little bit. And when I talk about onboarding, it's both prior to the start dates, everything from contracts, right? So, hey, we found the individual, we want to work with them, we want to start them on Monday. And then it's like, okay, well, let us look at the contracts. Then, you might have a legal review saying, okay, well, what are we doing about non-competes and IP and what about confidentiality and what NDAs and background checks? And so there's this whole component of, hey, what about the legal and risk components of this? Have we thought about that? And have we done all the right things that we need to do? Oh, no, we haven't. So now we've got to go through that loop, right? In the background, the individual sort of waiting to go has been confirmed as, being brought in. So the business leaders led it. They found who they want to work with. They've selected them. They said, yeah, we're going to get you in. And then they've just realized, hey, there's a brick wall there. There's a load of hoops I haven't jumped through on that component. Then you've even got the sort of procurement side of things. So it's like, well, how do we set this person up to be paid, right? If we're not going through a partner, how do we actually pay this individual? How do we set them up? How do we even treat this individual? Are they a supplier? Are they a vendor? Because they're not an employee. They're not on our traditional payroll. Traditional vendor empanelment processes can take 3 months. So you've got that component. So you've got procurement, you've got risk, and you've got legal coming in saying, well, hey, we don't know how to manage this, how to treat this individual, and then the business sort of coming up to block after block after block because those processes haven't been established. So I'd say that's where the issues start. Then if you get through those, I think probably 8 out of 10 times the first payment doesn't go well. So it's okay, they're in, we finally managed to get through the hoops. Oh, how do we approve this payment? What documents do I have to submit? What system? Are they set up correctly? Oh no, they weren't set up correctly. So we have these issues in terms of that first experience, that first month. The onboarding process where sometimes you actually end up losing the individual, or you get them in and then that first payment piece. So it's all infrastructure based. It's all about getting involved the right people at the right time.
So ideally, I guess when you start this, have some kind of cross-functional team that's looking at it, but it doesn't always happen like that, I understand. But
yeah, and even actually just thinking about it, setting people up for laptops, for printing, getting them an email ID. Even things like that you'd assume it's like, oh, we can't create an email ID for this individual because they're not on this system. To be on this system, they have to be an employee. They can't go on that system because they're not an employee. how do we give them an email? But then they'll have access to all this other data. Is that what we want? Do we have to do a risk assessment on confidentiality and things like that? So, yeah, I think lining up those cross-functional teams, getting in place the right processes and controls on the boring stuff. So this sort of thing is really dull for a business stakeholder to get involved in. It's really painful. And I think sometimes what can happen is that business stakeholders then give up. So they might say, this is too difficult. So what I'll do is I'll take a suboptimal solution, right? I'll hire someone else, or I'll just take someone in, who maybe isn't exactly what we need to get this job done. But we'll just do that because it's too difficult. And then obviously that impacts project outcomes, it impacts delivery, it impacts capability building, it takes longer, which ultimately impacts business performance, right? And so it all has this knockdown effect. So yeah, it's the boring stuff that usually goes wrong.
Okay. And so these were some of the quite practical things that can go wrong and often do go wrong in the first kind of instances when you kind of start executing, right?
Yeah.
But if we elevate it to kind of the CXO level, right? So because obviously agile talent models has the potential to really kind of transform growth and profitability of companies. What is it? If you know, what is it? Kind of what is it that the CEO or the CFO or COO? What are the things that they kind of think about when it comes to executing these things? What do they want to get out of it?
Why are they driving? Yeah, that's a good thought. So I think the first thing is on shifting their cost base. So I think when most organizations now look at their cost base, and so many have been burnt, right? They want variability in that cost base. They want to be able to turn on and off cost very quickly. So before, that was mainly the world of a startup, right? Okay, as a startup company, you don't want to bring in too much fixed cost. Everything you want to sort of be able to turn off, turn up, ramp up, ramp down, right? I think big organizations hadn't really thought about that, right? They'd increase their cost base, keep hiring. I think now CXOs are absolutely looking at that. How do I create more variable cost in my organization? So that's the first thing. 2, how do I invest in things but lower my risk? So I want to try something new. So most organizations now, when they're thinking about growth, they're looking at new opportunities, new areas, new versions of their business, new product lines, new customers to service, new markets. Now, to do all those things and to try new things, how do you do that in a lower risk model, right? So I think they're looking at lower risk delivery models that, again, they can run tests, they can try things with more flexibility. So they're not overly committed. They haven't hired a load of people to launch something new and suddenly they realize it's not the right thing. And now they've got the pain of taking that all down, the costs associated with it. So first one is variable cost. The second one is, how do I keep trying things in a very uncertain environment? Because I can't stop innovating. I can't stop trying to grow, but do that and lower my risk in these things not working. I think that's the second one. And the third one, I think, is absolutely, how do I create an agile organization? I think CXOs today are always looking over their shoulder, right? They're always thinking, where am I going to get disrupted? Where's my business going to come under attack by something completely out of my control, right? Because so many of those things are happening all the time now. So I think they're in a day-to-day basis thinking, am I going to wake up today and some news is going to come through that's going to fundamentally change my business, right, or disrupt my business? And I think when you feel like that, you want to create a fleet of foot organization, an ability to say, today, these are the capabilities I need to succeed and win. But tomorrow, those capabilities that I need to succeed and win may be different. How quickly can I shift my capability set from this to this? And I think they're looking to reduce that lead time significantly and the cost and pain associated with making those changes in the organizations. I think those are probably the three biggest.
And in terms of just your second point about kind of de-risking and testing things out where you can use kind of agile talent models, can that be applied also to actually execute in a flexible workforce model, that you kind of start in a team or a function, right? Is that how people do it or should be looking at it essentially?
Absolutely. I think I'm a big believer in pilots, right? In running real world tests. So you can create as many talent models in a deck or in a proposal and create lots of boxes and processes and ideas and theories. And that's important to go through the thinking. But at some point, you've got to learn through real world tests. But when you test something, you don't want to test it at scale on day one. You don't want to try in every single market in every single business area. You don't want everyone to be doing it. So finding an area that's going to have the biggest impact. Where is either the most pain associated with not having flexibility? Where is the most need or opportunity area? Identifying those and doing small scale tests. But the thing about that is not just testing it and saying, oh, that was successful, let's now roll it out. It's saying, okay, what did we learn in terms of the processes, the controls, the governance as well? Who would we need to have involved? And use that test case to build out your overall approach. So yeah, testing in an area, learning from that, and then applying it very quickly before you then scale it. Having someone that owns it as a model. I think the organizations that are really succeeding are the ones that aren't seeing it as an ad hoc solution. Say, as and when you need, just bring in an individual here, fill this gap here, fill that gap here. The organizations that are really doing this well are the ones that are saying, actually, the makeup of my workforce is going to fundamentally change. Today, I might have 1% of my workforce being independent in my professional segment. In 5 years' time, maybe it goes to 10%. Maybe it goes 5%, 10%, 15%. So if that is going to happen, if that's actually what I need to happen to succeed and win, what does that mean for my organization? How am I going to do it at that scale? How am I going to do it at the 10% scale? Not to try and work it out once that's happened retrospectively.
So maybe to summarize, where are most organizations on this journey today, would you say, in our market?
Yeah. Most organizations are convinced that flexible, agile capability building and talent models make complete sense. They're in a test and learn stage of that, though. Needs-based, reactive, try things, learn from it. A few of them are defining, more strategic models. So I'd say what's happened is that C-suite have decided, yes, this makes sense. The execution of it, though, is more test and learn and trial. Operating models and strategies and infrastructure is sort of following behind. So I think in most organizations, what's likely to happen is decision gets made, yes, we're open to and we want to, need to shift our talent model and make it more flexible and agile. Business leaders then go and build their capabilities and execute in that way at pace. That gets to a point of scale that becomes uncomfortable without proper infrastructure, and then other functions responsible for building that infrastructure come in and build the governance retrospectively, is my expectation of how the market actually evolves and matures.
Fantastic. Well, that was great, and I've certainly learned a lot from that. So thank you
Thanks
for joining.
Cheers.
Thanks.